Hello and welcome to Block Devs Tech Talk episode number 3. I'm your host Tracy and we have Chris Verceles here. He is the CTO of HaloDAO. Chris, would you mind telling us more about yourself and what HaloDAO is?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. Well, I mean, the quick and short of it is HaloDAO is essentially building, synthetic stablecoins and essentially a decentralized exchange, or also called an AMM, optimized for stablecoin swaps for Southeast Asian currency. So, yeah, I mean that's a quick description of it.
Yeah, so this is another DeFi project, correct?
Yep. What we like to say is that we want to bring the real world liquidity of Southeast Asia into the DeFi total value lock. So rather than having, let's say, USD denominated, rather than having financial products built on top of, let's say, USD denominated stablecoins and economies, we want to essentially bring in, the rest of the world in, at least starting with Southeast Asia.
Right. Okay, so first of all, can you tell us what DeFi is? I know it's very popular right now, but a lot of us don't understand what DeFi is. What is DeFi, and yeah, what how is it making an impact right now in the financial industry?
Yeah, no, good question. Uh, well, at least in my understanding, I like to think of DeFi as just, and it stands for decentralized finance, right? For those who may not be familiar. And the way I like to explain it is that DeFi is sort of like a low barrier way, or an easier way for anyone with an internet connection to have access to financial products that traditionally only exist, let's say, if you have a minimum balance in your bank account or something like that, or if you have a personal banker, or if you have a relationship, or if you're an investor in a certain fund, right? That all requires you to have like a minimum amount of well, I mean, to keep it simple, you could say like balance with a financial institution. But in the case of DeFi, anyone can access it. There's no minimum maintaining balance. You can earn a savings rate. You can lend. You can borrow with as little as, let's say, what the equivalent of a dollar, or whatever other currency you want to denominate that in.
Yes, and HoloDAO is one of those applications that will do those things in
Yeah,
DeFi.
yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
there's a whole lot, right? So the pillars of it are like, MakerDAO, Compound, Aave, of course, and a lot of people know that. But those are, the first ones. And what we have is sort of a regional focus. So we want to enable that for, let's say, Southeast Asia, while being regulatory compliant and working with, institutional players and commercial use cases that will bring in the liquidity, because as we know, Southeast Asia is very fragmented in terms of like regulatory jurisdictions and markets. So we sort of want to try and bring a smoother experience to that. Yeah.
Right. So let's go back to HaloDAO. Yeah. So you mentioned that it is a project that focuses on Southeast Asia and stable coins. What is a stable coin and how is it different from a CBDC?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'll start with the stablecoin. So a stablecoin is essentially a cryptocurrency, like, let's say, USDC or USDT or DAI. Those would be the more familiar examples, where the price doesn't fluctuate, or it's not as volatile. I mean, it does fluctuate a bit, but like you see, you can reasonably assume that the price will stay at, let's say, one USDC will be $1, or somewhere around that, right, within a few percentage points, compared to, let's say, Bitcoin or Ethereum, that swing wildly in either direction, up or down. So it's something that you can trade against and take profits in. Yeah, if that answers your question. Yeah. And central bank digital currencies, on the other hand, would conceptually be similar to stablecoins, except it's not issued by a private entity. A central bank digital currency is exactly that, a currency in whatever digital form, issued by a central bank itself. So I think, what is the percentage now? I don't remember the exact number, but I think about 80% of central banks around the world are in various processes of releasing their own central bank digital currency. And it may or not be blockchain or DLT based, right? But it's just a digital token of varying kinds. Yeah.
Right. And is it correct to say that a central bank digital currency is has a one-to-one ratio in the
Yeah,
reserves, while stablecoin is has a ratio to what
yeah,
reserves. The
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Good differentiation. Sorry, I'm not sure if I interrupted the end of your question.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, a stable coin, the way it's issued, and thanks for pulling out the definition, is essentially a private institution will take it, right? It's not the central bank. So a private institution will accept, let's say, again, using a dollar example, let's say one physical dollar in their bank account or something. Let's say a user deposits that with that institution. That institution will then issue sort of an IOU token, and that would be a stable coin, right?
Mm.
Uh, I mean, a good example is if you use an e-wallet and you see your balance after you cash in. Let's say you cash in $100 and you see your $100 balance just digitally printed on the screen. Uh, that's sort of what would happen, except the stable coin is not just recorded in that company's database, it's recorded on the blockchain on everyone's database. So that's called an asset-backed stablecoin, where it holds collateral to sort of keep the value of the digital token that functions as an IOU. Um, a central bank digital currency, on the other hand, would not necessarily need, let's say, fiat currency backing or collateral. It would function off whatever the central bank says it functions off. If they say it has value, then it has value, right? So whether it's a gold reserve or they're just printing money, a central bank digital currency is just declared to have value without having, like, let's say, a traditional fiat currency collateral. Uh, I think you mentioned, does it fluctuate a bit, if I heard that right? And it
Mm.
actually, I would not expect it to fluctuate at all because it's just as good as the physical notes that we have in our wallets or our bank accounts, and it would not fluctuate due to market forces. Conceptually, it shouldn't. I mean, I haven't seen it. It's not. None of them are in production yet, so who knows? But it would be the same as the coin that we have in our wallet, or whatever physical note we have. We don't have to worry about arbitraging that too much. Of course, there are forex markets, but I expect it to be more stable than a traditional stable coin, right? Yeah. If that was clear, happy to rephrase. I think I went off there.
No, it's pretty much precise, I guess. It makes more sense now to me, at least. So anyway, so stable coins. We have different dollar denominated stable coins right now. We have USDT, USDC, BUSD, Binance USD. Do they compete with each other? And if yes, how do they
Hmm.
how do they compete with each other?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. My opinion is no, they don't compete with each other because let's start with asset-backed stablecoins like or centralized stablecoins like, let's say, the BUSD, USDC, USDT. Let's not talk about decentralized ones like that yet. Uh, I would say the centralized stablecoins or the asset-backed stablecoins might compete with each other as far as the companies that issue them compete with each other. So it really depends on what their on what their product market fit is. Uh, so for example, you're asking me, does USDC, which is issued by, was it Circle, do they compete with the BUSD issued by Binance? Yes and no, maybe. I would say BUSD is issued so that people have a stable exchange in Binance. Is US For what reason is USDC issued? I mean, it depends on the business, right? My general answer is that they don't compete with each other, simply because they're just issued by different companies with different businesses. And there's room for all of them. Now, if you ask me, does an asset-backed stablecoin or centralized stablecoin compete with a decentralized one like DAI? Um, Again, I think not, because, for example, to keep the peg of a stablecoin, you typically would create a trading pair against it between that's the decentralized stablecoin and the centralized stablecoin. So you actually, to keep the peg of a synthetic, which is, let's say, a decentralized stablecoin, you need to pair it against a centralized stablecoin, which is more stable. So I wouldn't say they compete even in that sense because they help each other keep their pegs, at least as far as I understand. So no, I don't think any of them will compete. Like in Southeast Asia, there are a whole bunch popping up.
Mm.
I know Binance is issuing a whole bunch. I know CeeLo is issuing a few. Uh, well, not necessarily issuing, right? Allowing other people to issue using their technology. And there's a whole bunch of synthetic protocols popping up. I don't know if they're competing against each other. because they definitely help each other, and it helps provide trading liquidity and arbitrage mechanisms to keep the peg. Um, but I would say they're all complementary, because if you're building in the protocol space, it's not so much competition as it is composability. So the more that there is, I think the more can go around, if that makes sense.
Great, great. So where does HaloDAO fit in with all these stablecoin technology?
Yeah. So where do we fit in? So
Right. So I
okay,
understand
so
that HaloDAO is building a decentralized stablecoin. Yes.
we're building a protocol that allows anyone to supply collateral and then issue their own synthetic. Now, that synthetic can be a
Hmm.
stablecoin, yes. Uh, where do we
Yes.
fit in? Well, I mean, for example, when we look to onboard, let's say, a country or a region into what we call the Web3 economy or permissionless commerce, we look at, for example, is there already a centralized or asset-backed stablecoin in the region? If there
Hmm.
is, we work with it. We also work, of course, with the regulated exchanges. If there's none, then we provide the way for anyone to issue their own synthetic out of their own collateral. I'd say where we fit in is we provide the ramps into DeFi from the real world, if there is none. So if there's already a centralized, let's say USD style stablecoin in the region, and there's already an exchange, then we don't need to do too much. We just need to provide the app, and then people can get into that through the centralized stablecoin company or the exchange. But if there's none, then a synthetic can be placed and created using HaloDAO's protocol, and then that could be an on ramp for exchanges to allow people to get into DeFi, and vice versa. So it's sort of that, right? Where do we fit in? We see ourselves as working very heavily with regulated entities and ramps to onboard people into DeFi. And if there are none, we help build up that infrastructure as well. So, yeah, where do we fit? To try and answer that more clearly, we don't replace or we don't compete with anything. We work with what's there, and we help build what is not there, using synthetics and the method of exchange, which is the AMM that we're launching. So, yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned AMM. Can you tell me more about this AMM that you're about to launch, and what first of all, what is AMM for the
Yeah.
benefit of our viewers?
Right, right. That's important. An AMM is called an automated market maker. I guess the more broadly understood term is a decentralized exchange like Uniswap. So there are different kinds of decentralized exchanges, right? So the first one I think was, do you remember the name? I forgot. It was the one before IDEX, but it's essentially an order book, right? It looks like a typical trading dashboard UI where you place an order and someone buys it, pretty much like Binance. That's an order book exchange. Now that can be decentralized too, and
I
some were released, but they found that it was too slow, because if it's decentralized, no one's there to provide the central liquidity to market make, essentially. So that's where automated market makers came out. So Uniswap came out with their constant product formula, right, which essentially
Mm.
made it possible for the exchange to be separate from liquidity providers. So liquidity providers provide liquidity, traders use liquidity, and the automated market making mechanism that Uniswap provided was the missing piece to make a decentralized exchange really, really fast. Not necessarily efficient, but faster, so that it can compete with traditional exchanges, which they are doing now. So yeah, that's what an AMM is. It's an automated market maker that matches the buyer to the seller without there needing to be a central entity that provides liquidity or market makes.
Got it. Okay. Yes. So in terms of determining the price feeds, how does HaloDAO, um, what is the mechanism behind HaloDAO's price feed determination?
Yeah, yeah. So that's a cornerstone component, right? So price feeds are oracles. And I guess to take a step back, price feeds are used to determine if a synthetic, or like, let's say, a stable coin like DAI, uh, is at the correct price, right? So let's say
How do you even know if it's in the correct price? Do you, yeah.
yeah. So we have to use like real world information, right? And we have to get that from real world APIs that determine price. I mean, there's
Mhm.
two ways. One is real world information, and that's through an oracle, like let's say Chainlink or UMA. And another one is to check the price on the AMM itself. So you can actually use an AMM like Uniswap as an oracle to check the on-chain price. Um, to give the example of MakerDAO, they use an oracle to mint the DAI at 150% collateralization ratio, meaning that when you deposit ETH, that Ethereum is then locked in a contract. The contract then triggers a check with, let's say, an off-chain API source. And of course, I'm simplifying a lot of things. That's not exactly how it works, but there is an off-chain source, let's say, very similar to a Forex API, right? Where if you want to check the price of, let's say, USD to PHP, that exists. So what an oracle does is it links an off-chain API source to a smart contract, because smart contracts can't
Mhm.
consume API requests. So an oracle sort of bridges that gap. So yeah, every DeFi protocol that needs to reference real world prices will have an oracle, and that real world price can be, you know, the price of, let's say, a currency like USDC, so that it can mint the correct amount of DAI, or it can be, I think there's this weird project that it was just a fun project someone released. They called it pardon the language, they called it shitcoin, I think. And I think the Oracle tracked the amount of dog droppings in San Francisco was that, and then it increased the value of the token correspondingly. I might be recalling it like incorrectly, but that's the kind of things you can do. You can track any real world price and then influence the behavior or price of a synthetic token that exists on chain. So Chainlink was the first kind of oracle to allow the feeding of data into smart contracts, but then there's a lot more now. We're using UMA because it has some advantages that we can see, mainly that, well, I think you can't flash loan it because there's like two layers to it. It doesn't just check the price, on off-chain price. There's like a token
Mhm.
voting side, and then there's actual checking of the price if there's a dispute on the token voting. So yeah, that was a quick, big run through. I hope that answered the question in any way.
Yes. Yes. So you mentioned flash loan. What is it, and how does it affect the DeFi protocols that we have right now?
Yeah, yeah. So flash loaning, as a concept, as best as I can explain it. Okay, wait. Let me start at the top. So the way blockchains work, where you change state from, let's say, the original state to the new state, is and that happens between blocks, right? At any point between those blocks, you can do whatever you want with the state of the original block, as long as you go back to the original state at the end. And what does that mean in a good example? If you, for example, borrow, so let's say a Uniswap pool has 1 million DAI and 1 million ETH, right, in a pair for trading. If you wanted to borrow the 1 million DAI, but you don't have any collateral to back it up with, you can borrow that DAI within the time span of the, let's say, 14, 15 seconds of an Ethereum block, as long as you return that DAI in full before the next block kicks off. So
Mhm.
it's not
Mhm.
like with, so let's say a server instance that's running 24/7. You can't do something like that because the state is just live 24/7, right? With in a blockchain, the state transitions in Ethereum, at least every 14, 15 seconds, right? With Bitcoin, it's 10 minutes. Or is it still 10 minutes? I don't know. So yeah, I mean, there's no instance, there's nothing checking between those times. It's just, state one and state two, and the change between the two. If you can do something before the state
Mhm.
transition and restore the state after, then you're good. So you can borrow all the liquidity in Uniswap if you want, in that in that in that change in state from state one to state two, and then do something with it as long as you return it afterwards. So with flash loans, it's like, it's under collateralized loans, pretty much zero collateral,
Mhm.
as long as you return it right away. So that's pretty much how it works, and it has been used to mess up the prices of certain oracles. Uh,
Yes.
to give an example again, so let's say that same example with Uniswap, there's 1 million DAI and there's 1 million ETH. What's the
Mhm.
price in that fictional pair? The price of one ETH is one DAI, because 1 million DAI to 1 million ETH, right? Without doing all the accurate math, it's one ETH to one DAI. if you flash loan, let's say 1 million DAI from somewhere else, let's say Balancer, and you put it in that pool, you now have 2 million DAI to 1 million ETH. So you've
Mm,
changed the price. So that's how a flash loan
mm,
can change the price between state transitions. If you change the price, then that wreaks havoc in other places because then you can do things that are not expected because the price has changed, right? You can do arbitrage, you can trade all within that
mm,
state transition. So
mm,
yeah, yeah. So when I say UMA, or at least I think so far it's not vulnerable to that kind of attack, is because UMA does not check a price as it is. It checks a price as the token holders believe the price is. So if you do a price request to UMA will first give you the price that all the token holders have voted on. You can't flash loan that. Like you can borrow 1 million DAI from somewhere, it's not going to affect that, right? The only time the price is checked is when there's a disagreement among the token votes of a certain price. So yeah, that's sort of why at least we're looking at UMA so far. Yeah. Of course, there are other approaches, but that one seems nice to us for now.
yeah, seems very interesting. Yeah, so uh, uh, I think that's the advantage of using UMA over
Yeah.
oracles, right? Yes.
Well, I mean, it is an oracle. They call it an optimistic oracle. There
Yeah,
are pros and cons, right? But that's one nice feature of it. So yeah.
interesting. And also, since we are in talking about DeFi and governance is becoming more popular in the DeFi space right now. Other projects are implementing their own governance tokens and mechanisms. And HaloDAO is also will also have its own governance. Can you tell me or briefly describe how HaloDAO's governance model? What's HaloDAO's governance model?
Um, well, I mean, in true DeFi startup fashion, we're pretty much just forking what's there, right? Uh, so it seems like the way forward now is if you build up a DeFi protocol, if it's been built before, you just fork it and then you customize as you go. So I can't say we've pinned down the exact model of governance, but we're looking at something like Compound. But the problem with that is that on-chain voting is really expensive now, right? So the main
Mm-hmm.
consideration is gas fees. So we're looking at something called it's called like optimistic governance, you could say, or optimistic voting, where we do proposals and voting off-chain, something like Snapshot,
Mm-hmm.
but then we do the on-chain execution afterwards. That would minimize the gas fees for voters there. So I guess that's one differentiation in our approach. Just because gas fees are high right now in Ethereum. Yeah, yeah. I mean, layer two is coming, so it should be good. And yeah, but till then, that we have to do as much as possible off chain, and that includes some like optimistic, quote unquote, optimistic calculations. Yeah.
Yeah. So how is this governance? Uh, how is the governance component will how will the governance component complement or will it complement the entire project? What I mean, I'm trying to understand why is it becoming an important feature in a DeFi project like right now?
Yeah. No, that's an important question. And like to give the best analogy I can give is like if you have shares in a company, right? You
Mm-hmm.
and let's say they're voting shares. Let's assume all shares in a company are voting shares. Whenever there's a company decision, they can put up the vote, and every person who has a share or proves they have a share can submit a vote, right? And then the majority wins. I guess that would be the main importance, is right. Anyone who has a share of the protocol, which means you have a share of the protocol's governance token, you're
Mm-hmm.
effectively functioning as a voting class share, right? If you were to try and use traditional company stocks as an
Mm-hmm.
example. Of course, they do different things now because there's additional utility because everything's programmable. But that would be the main function, I guess, if I understand the question. Holding the governance token means you also have a say in the governance of the protocol. Yeah.
Right. So if I hold like a Halo token, I have a voting right for Halo.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. And just like a lot of protocols, you can delegate your tokens to other people who you think might be experts and would have the patience to vote on every single proposal, or you can do it yourself. Yeah,
Mm. It sounds very it sounds very interesting how DeFi is really shaping up right now.
yeah,
What
yeah.
yeah, but what if, like, for example, if I do a if I cast a vote, w- I have a specific voting right. What does that if I cast a vote right now, will my voting rights be lesser after?
Uh, well, no, actually, as long as you hold the hollow token.
Ah,
So
I
sort of
see.
like, let's say there's a voting period, and they usually call it an epoch,
Yes.
and then they take a snapshot at the end of the period, and then that's how they check the allocated votes. Yeah, if I understand the question right, for example, an example is like Kyber. If you're staked and you're actively voting, then you get certain rewards for that. But yeah, one token is like one vote, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I mean, if you have half a token or a fraction of a token, fraction of a vote. Yeah.
So um so it doesn't my voting shares doesn't become less whether I vote frequently or I vote often.
No, not at all. I guess it
Uh,
wouldn't change in any way there. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean you're spending your token, right? It just
yes.
means you're signaling with your token. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And then what type of um, actions or what type of actions can people vote to in
Um,
general?
in general,
Yeah, or yeah.
I guess any action you can think of. I mean, it's just like that. I guess the main difference is what kind of proposals can you do manually and what kind of proposals can you execute automatically.
Mm-hmm.
So if and that depends on the state of the decentralization, see how far towards decentralization a project is. So if you look at MakerDAO, I think they're reasonably decentralized now, at least as far as I can see. So a vote in Maker would be more processed on chain than, like, say, the vote of a protocol that just started,
Mm-hmm.
because usually they start very centralized, right? Where the foundation that built the protocol is executing all the proposal results manually. So an
Mm-hmm.
example is the proposal to, let's say, change the total number of tokens available, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that won't go through automatically. If the protocol just launched, the executing foundation will check the vote, and then it's up to them to implement it and then do the manual code changes or upgrade the contracts. But in the case of, let's say, a protocol that's already fully mature and decentralized, that can be an automatic action, right? I guess that would be the main consideration there. Yeah, if I got the question right.
Good. Yeah, so I'm just trying to understand. So someone will have to submit a proposal who should also be a holder of the governance token, like a Halo token in your case, correct?
Yeah, yeah, that would make sense. I mean, at least
Yes.
that's the way we would do it. Of course, any protocol can allow anyone to submit a proposal, but then that would be like susceptible to like spam or something. So yeah, typically, those who hold the tokens uh, can propose a vote. Yeah,
Right. And then after that, same token holders can also vote for the proposal.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
that good? Yeah.
definitely. Yeah,
Right. Mm. It sounds like very interesting to me. Yes, because you can never do this in a traditional um, stock market or a traditional financial environment. Yeah, so it's very interesting how you guys are lowering the barrier for this kind of
yeah. Well,
financial tools.
definitely not just us, right? We're a lot of the
Yes.
initial protocols in the space have already built the tools, so we just need to use them and then customize and build on top of that. So it's definitely not just us. We just started, so yeah.
Yeah. So and yeah, most of all, since you mentioned gas fees are expensive, becoming expensive in Ethereum, it's not cheap these days. How does it affect HaloDAO, or how does it affect any project?
Yeah. I guess I can answer in terms of like any project, since they would be dealing with the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, of course, like the whole narrative now in this bull run is like cross-chain DeFi and cross-chain like NFTs, cross-chain DeFi, essentially interoperability now. So the way it affects you, if you're planning for a protocol and you want to deploy, and you want to set up sort of your dev flows, and Ethereum is very, very expensive, the general approach is you deploy in Ethereum because that's where all the bridges come from. And then you do parallel deployments or selective deployments on other chains. So there's a number of, I'd say, benefits to deploying on Ethereum first, whether or not the gas fees are high. And number one is composability, because to improve your time to market, you want to build as little yourself as possible, which means you want to
Mm-hmm.
reuse other protocols in the space that have built foundational tools. That's all currently on Ethereum. Of course, like BSC is catching up very well. But like, for example, if you wanted to have an outsourced Oracle, like UMA, that doesn't exist on any other chain, right? It takes a while to build an Oracle system yourself and make it decentralized. If you want to build your own Chainlink or UMA, that would be pretty difficult. You're better off starting on Ethereum. Then once you deploy your protocol on Ethereum, any tokens that need to be transferable in your ecosystem, like for example, if I were to deploy MakerDAO again, I would sort of use, let's say UMA, I would use Ethereum as a collateral type, and then I would use that to mint DAI, and then I would send DAI and make sure it's supported over a token bridge, and duplicate the rewards contract on Ethereum,
Mm-hmm.
on let's say BSC, on AVAX, on whatever other chain has smart contract capability, right? And all the layer twos as well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so you could do that, and then that would facilitate the end user experience of your token, but at the same time, make sure that your protocol is where it needs to be to take advantage of composability, or just being faster, having a faster time to market because of existing protocols on Ethereum. So that's sort of that. Yeah, I mean it's getting better. So for example, there's Polygon, there's XDAI, there's Optimism, and like for example, all the big protocols are launching on Optimism now, and it's getting really good. So I don't think we'll have the problem for much longer. But generally, that is at least the approach. I think you deploy in Ethereum so that the bridges come from Ethereum, and then you can get support in the bridges, and then you build the end user experience by deploying some portions of your protocol on, let's say, BSC, AVAX, and whatnot. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this is something that HaloDAO is looking into as an approach, correct?
Yeah, we're definitely looking into it. Yeah, no roadmap sequence on which chain will come next, but whichever
Mm-hmm.
chain has the most composability and the most developer activity would come right after an Ethereum deployment, at least as far as I can see.
Nice. Yes. So, lastly, I would like to know what's special about HaloDAO. First of all, is some people would pronounce it as
Oh yeah,
HaloDAO, and
yeah.
Halo. Can you can you can you share as an can you share as an inspiration about HaloDAO's name? How did you come up with the name, and then what makes it special
Mhm.
besides
Yeah.
other projects?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say our value proposition is at least not on the protocol side. Actually, it's
Mm-hmm.
on, and like I said, our goal is to bring real world liquidity in terms of Southeast Asian use cases into DeFi, and really bring that low barrier financial service experience to end users who don't know anything about DeFi. Uh, that being said, we're building a protocol because we need to build liquidity to enable permissionless use cases. So permissionless use cases like cross-border e-commerce, and everyone says remittance, but yes, remittance, uh, high yield savings rates on your stablecoin wallets.
Mm-hmm.
That's all things we're working on. But to build that and get that running, and we've already launched our first product there. But to build those end user experiences, you need to build the liquidity, the permissionless liquidity, on
Mm-hmm.
permissionless chains first. Thus, the protocol. So, I mean, I wouldn't say we've invented anything so far, but we're just tailoring it to the region. With the protocol, it needs to be optimized for swaps between stablecoins of different prices. Because, for example, Curve is only optimized for swaps of coins with the same, ideally the same price. So it needs to be
Mm.
tweaked a bit. Um, but the difference really comes in our approach, in our end user experience that we're going for, which would come down the line. That in approach to our general regulatory approach is always also just be very, very compliant. Like so yeah, so we work with licensed entities a lot more, and we have a lot more, I'd say, nitty gritty BD than a protocol would. But the goal of that is to bring liquidity into the protocol in a permissionless way, while working with existing institutions and compliance requirements. So I guess that sort of focus downstream is what separates us, I think. Yeah.
Yes. And the name Halo, where did it come from? Halo
Oh,
Dao. Halo.
it's a
Halo, Halo.
Filipino dessert called halo halo. So I actually don't know why we chose that, but we figured it would sound like a nice name. So far, I don't think there's another HaloDAO or Halo token. So yeah,
So it's
I
Halo,
might be
not
wrong.
Halo.
Yeah,
Halo.
I might be wrong, but so far we haven't seen one.
Yeah. And a lot of DeFi projects are using food to name their projects like Sushi Swap, Pizza.
Yeah. Well, we didn't follow that because it's food, but just because it's colorful, actually. So
So lastly, where can we find more information about HaloDAO if we wanna get updated?
well, we're on Telegram and on Discord. So I mean, we have a Medium publication, but then that's being gutted at the moment to prepare for our launch. So if you join the Telegram and Discord chats, you should be able to keep in touch. Of course, it's on
Mhm.
Twitter too, so the typical places. Yeah.
When are we? When will HaloDAO launch?
We'll have to wait for the official announcement for that
Ah,
one, but it will be relatively soon, as far as I can currently say. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's it. Do you have any other um, do you have any other stuff that you would like to say before we end?
No, nothing else here. But yeah. Once our official announcements come up, I guess if we have another session, then we can talk about some cool things coming up.
Yes. Looking forward to it. So, thank you, Chris, for being on the Tech Talks episode number 3. Thank you, and guys, don't forget to subscribe to our channel after watching and like our videos as well.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thanks, Chris.